If I've had one success in the self-storage business, it's been our ability to hit or exceed the net operating income line, the NOI line, in our Proformas. We generally create a Proforma before we put a project into service, and we can hit those NOI lines with unbelievable accuracy. However, most of the mistakes I've made have been below the NOI line. Let's talk about that in today's episode. My name is Mark Helm, and I'm the author of Creating Wealth Through Self-Storage, and I'm the creator of the Self-Storage Quick Start Academy. And what I do is I support small investors who want to get in the self-storage business or who want to grow their self-storage business, strategically do so in a way that creates true wealth and a fulfilling career. There's all types of training, both free and paid for, at quickstartacademy.com and creatingwealththroughselfstorage.com. Now, it may seem counterintuitive to say that most of the mistakes I've made are below the net operating income line. Why? Well, because there's so very few variables below the net operating income line. That's one of the reasons self-storage is such a great investment for the small investor. There's no or very few capital improvements. There's no tenant improvements. There's no commissions to pay. With a few capital expenses like blacktopping and replacing an HVAC and the climate control every 15 years or so. I mean, those are, you know when those are going to happen, and it's very easy to schedule for those with a reserve account. So why are most of my mistakes below the net operating income line? Well, for a couple reasons. First of all, I have my attention focused very intently on that net operating income line. And as you know, whatever you tend to put your attention on is what you tend to have influence and power over. But in most projects we've been doing over the past 4 to 5 years, they've been value-add projects. In other words, we're expanding and we're buying a 35,000 square foot facility and doubling its size. And where I've missed the most is in the debt service. The debt service tends to be, in a few projects, higher than what I projected in my Proformas prior to putting those projects into service. Now, that doesn't affect the value, but what it does affect is the net cash flow. It makes, for us, hitting the preferred returns a little bit harder and taking a little bit longer. So it's not so much that we've been over budget in the construction, although we have been over budget on a few of them, but not by a whole lot, maybe 5% or so on a couple projects. Where we've run into most of our issues is the length of time it takes to do the construction, the length of time it takes to get the approval for the site work, the length of time it takes to get the approval to pour the concrete, the weather, the amount of time it takes has added the number of months before we start generating income, which adds to the amount of interest and carrying costs that we've had. All of that's below the net operating income line. Now, usually we raise money. In some cases we borrow money, but in most cases we raise enough money to cover what we think are going to be the negative cash flow and or the carrying costs. But if that construction timeline is dragged out, there's more months of servicing that interest. Now, many of the loans have an interest reserve that we can utilize for that. But when you hit that interest reserve, that bounces the amount of loan proceeds up, and then once the project is stabilized, your debt service is higher and your carrying costs have been higher. In some cases, we have gone back to the investors and said we need more cash. For us, that's very expensive money. That's the preferred return. That's how much that cost us. Or we just go on and hit the interest reserve or borrow more money. And even though that's cheaper, that makes the below the net operating income line a little bit higher. So what happens? It takes us longer to start paying the preferred return back. So what's the solution? Well, I finally have learned that in recent years, I add more time to the construction line than I think it's going to take. I have to answer a lot of questions to lenders and partners, but I'd rather be longer in starting to generate income and beat that than to be ready to start generating income like we showed on paper and not be able to. We're also moving into a time in this industry where there's more product coming online. So my coaching is, as you're analyzing these projects, what we're doing now is we're making the time that we start generating income longer, a year or more, and we're increasing the cost on the interest rate. And what that will do is, in our analysis, it should generate more carrying costs so that we're not exceeding below the net operating income line in real life what we have on the Proformas. Look, it's great to hit the value or exceed the value on the net operating income line. That solves a lot of problems. However, from an investor's point of view, what they're concerned about, what they have their attention on, yes, the NOI line, but they were really focused, I've learned, on everything that goes on below the net operating income line. Why? Because that's how they get their money. And if you're living off the cash flow, that's how you get your money. So far we've been very fortunate. Why? Well, because after we do the value add and we go a year or two, we're able to refinance because we have our attention on that net operating income line, and because cap rates are still very low, we're able to refinance or even sell those projects off and generate way more money in year 4 and year 5 than we anticipated on the Proforma. Why? Well, because the NOI is higher and cap rates are lower. So we catch up very quick at the conversion. And so far for us, we've been able to pay the preferred return and give all the investor money back on all the projects that we've worked on, except one. The very first one I put into service in 2008. I chronicled that in the case study in the book, Creating Wealth Through Self-Storage. But as more product hits the market, it's critical that as small investors, we make sure that we have enough carrying costs built in our analysis to cover the length of time till we start generating that extra income, and so that the investors are getting what they anticipated getting from the very start. For the small investor, this is still a great business. Of all the product types out there, self-storage is the safest, simply because there's so few variables below that net operating income line. But the few that there are, in today's market, make sure you cover for them. Believe me, I've learned the hard way, and I now have as much attention below the NOI line as I do above the NOI line. You do that, and you will have a fulfilling career, and you will create true wealth in this fantastic business of self-storage. So thank you very much. I look forward to being with you next week. Next week, we're going to talk about a case study on a project that was an expansion that we were able to sell and cause the conversion in 4 years, a year earlier than we had on our Proforma. So thanks. My name is Mark Helm. I'm the author of Creating Wealth Through Self-Storage, and I'm the creator of the Storage World Analyzer. That's the financial analysis tool we use to create the Proformas prior to putting the project into service. And those are the Proformas I'm talking about that we're hitting the NOI line on, and now we're putting more carrying cost in than we had in the past. So you can learn more about it at creatingwealththroughselfstorage.com. Go to Storage World Analyzer tab, or you can go to storageworldanalyzer.com. If you're not using it, I invite you to explore it. So thanks. I look forward to being with you again next week, and I'll see you then.